see what we got here. A Dreamcast, huh? Okay. Can't eat it. I highly doubt you could have sex with it. But you just might have a Dreamcast laying around your house. In this segment, I'm going to show you quite a bit of Dreamcast Homebrew. Of course, for the segment, you'll need a Dreamcast. Now, the great thing about a Dreamcast is you don't need any kind of mod chip. All you need is a Dreamcast, a couple of blank CDs, and a Windows or Linux laptop, which is what we got here. Now, some information about the Dreamcast, which is a great introduction to all homebrew. You have to understand that all of these new age disc-based consoles, they have a special way of putting the data onto the discs itself. Now, natively, the Dreamcast can read CDRs. Now, internally it has something called a GD-ROM or a Giga-Disc ROM. It's like the equivalent of a dual-layer CDR. Now, what's really great about that is, who the hell doesn't have a CD writer nowadays, and CDs are pretty damn cheap. The weird thing about the Dreamcast is how it actually puts the data on the discs, though. The first track has to be actual CD audio, at least 2 seconds. After that, it has its own custom file formatter, a way of putting the actual files on the disc. And it has to have a minimal of 1, but usually 2 files on the root of the disk. You have ip.bin, the ip.bin being the actual default executable of the disk itself, and firstread.bin. Firstread.bin could be extensions or drivers and then such, and then from there you can build on what we have ELF files. But as for the Dreamcast, ELF files are usually device drivers, like if you have a keyboard or a mouse, you got the maracas, the fishing rod, you got controllers, you got VMUs. All of that could be inside of ip.bin, but some people like to use ELF files. Now, to get started, we're going to need a couple of tools and utilities on the laptop. Now, I'm going to be using Windows because everyone uses Windows nowadays, but a lot of this is command line. I'll show you a couple of ways of putting together a couple of disks and a couple of discrepancies of what kind of file formats and file systems the Dreamcast use. How to find some really good homebrew. Like, I started all my console stuff with the Dreamcast. It was the first system I actually started getting actively involved in homebrew development, as well as the Game Boy Color. If you got a Dreamcast laying around, hopefully this will inspire you to, get the thing out of the closet, dust it off, and get it set up. Let's go to the laptop side, and I'll show you how to do some shit.
Of course, we're going to need some software that runs both on the Dreamcast and on the PC. And all you really have to do is Google Dreamcast emulation or Dreamcast Homebrew. That'll bring up a whole bunch of websites. Two of the primary ones that we'll be looking at today is Dreamcast-scene.com. Dreamcast Scene is a really good repository, and if you go to their database, what you can do is browse through their list of software. They have all of the recommended software, emulators, applications, demos, homebrew games, a whole bunch of great stuff. You just got to go and look through it. And you might want to browse through the hardware and get an understanding of what kind of hardware the Dreamcast has, if you care. Now, Dreamcast Scene's website is a little flaky on the download, so you might have to find an alternate download, but at least with Dreamcast Scene you can find some good Google search terms. Dreamcast Emulation, or DCEmulation.com, is a really good repository for all things Dreamcast, emulator and homebrew-wise. Now, their new website isn't completely finished or properly coded, so sometimes their download links are broken, but if you go to their help section, you can visit their original website, which is riddled with ads and poorly coded at best. But if you look on the left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of emulators you can get for the Dreamcast. Now, I'm going to be focusing on creating a self-bootable NES emulation disk based off of Nestor DC. Now, when you go in and you check out like an application or an emulator, it'll give a ranking system, usually, on whether or not something's worth the download. Now, Nestor DC is by far the best NES emulator for the Dreamcast. It's got about 99% accurate emulation. Now, I originally mentioned that the Dreamcast requires first read and ip.bin to boot on the root of the disk. Now this is where plain files come in. You can download the plain files, which are just that, just plain files, either in scrambled or unscrambled mode. Nowadays it doesn't matter which you get, because most of the tools that we'll be using will scramble it appropriately. Now, the plain files are just that. It's ip.bin and firstread.bin and whatever other drivers and folders and such that you might need. If you don't have the intelligence, which after this segment you should, to create your own bootable disks, you can get a Nero CD image or a Disk Juggler CD image. But to be honest, wasting a 700 meg CD for a 589K emulation disk and having to do like disk swapping is a pain in the ass. A note about Disk Juggler. Disk Juggler is made by Pattis Incorporated, and it's really hard to find their CD burning technology. It's really hard to find their program, and I don't think it's going to work under Windows NT, 2K, or XP. However, Alcohol 120 will burn CDI images. Self-boot inducer was supposed to be an easy breezy, noob-friendly way of creating your own self-bootable disks. I've had bad luck with it. Stay far, far away from it. There are much better things out, which I will show you in a little bit. Now, if you look up here, there's the Jim NES Boot Nero and Jim NES Boot Disk Juggler version. It is a tool that will create a self-booting Nero or Disk Juggler image. It uses some command line tools and batch file scripting, which I'll explain in a moment, to create a bootable Dreamcast disk. Okay, so I've already downloaded the plain files, and I've downloaded the Jim NES Boot Nero version. I've also downloaded some other stuff, which I'll explain in a little bit. So let me get to the dev folder, and I'm going to go into the Jim NES Boot Nero file folder. And there's always, got some temporary stuff here. Let me delete that. There's always a readme.txt. Always read the readme. I mean, it's got a lot of really nifty information in there on what exactly to do, how to put things together, and things of the such. I'm not going to explain this. You should have the, competence of a 4th grade reading level to understand that. Now we're going to open up the jimboot.bat file. Batch files are plain text files which can be opened up in any text editor and edited, and it's a line by line. It'll execute every single one of these in a command line, one at a time. So these echo commands say, okay, basic instructions, put what files in the right places. Okay. Now I'm going to explain some of the applications which are in the progs directory. We have bin to boot, CDI to Nero, and mkiso-fs, or make ISO file system. Now I'm going to go ahead and explain mkiso file system. What this does is creates ISO file systems. I'll run through the options real quick. -R means to use Rockridge disk format. -L means make it ISO 9660 compliant. -V is the volume header, like what the volume ID is when you put the disk inside of a computer, what it comes up as. In this case, it'll be NESDC. -O is your output file name, which is nesdc.iso. And then the last, right here, is what is your working folder? Where are all your files located? Bin to boot will take an ISO file and create a bootable CDI disk image, a Pattis Disk Juggler disk image of said ISO. And of course, it's using the /no hack option. Now, if you have this is going to spit out image.cdi. Maybe you don't want a CDI. Maybe you want an NRG or a Nero disk image. CDI to Nero will take CDI and turn it into a Nero image. So there it is. CDI to Nero, input file, output file. And then these commands just delete all of the temporary stuff that's been created. Okay? That's the basics of using make ISO-fs, CDI to Nero, and bin2boot.bat, or sorry, .exe. You can use these files, and modify this batch file so you can go ahead and create your own Dreamcast bootable disks. There is an easier way in which I'll explain right now. There's a program called Boot Dreams. This is easy breezy. If you screw this up, you're some sort of major league retard. Once you download the application and you run it, you can select on what type of ISO you want to make. Do you want to make a disk juggler? Do you want to make Nero disk it once, Nero track it once, burn directly to disk, or take an image and use their internal burner, like this program, to burn an image? So if you don't have Nero or you don't have Alcohol 120, you can use this application to burn ISOs. Now, remember, you need to have, here's Nestor DC 7.1. Here are the files. You have to have ip.bin and firstread.bin on the root of the directory and on the CD. And of course, reading the README of the program you're using, put whatever files you want on the disk in the appropriate directories. I have my ROMs in games, I have my Game Genie codes in Genie, I have my emulator skin in Pix, and I have the Nestor cheat code system in there. Whatever, if this was an MP3 player like DC Player. DC Player is a multi-format media player. Really not up to par with Xbox Media Center, but for an MP3 player, it's great. I put some music in my music folder. Here's my firstread.bin, my ip.bin. This is how the entire CD is going to be set up. Everything will be written to CD exactly as that. So, we have Boot Dreams, and we're going to browse, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to go to my dev folder, Dreamcast, Nestor DC 7.1. Files. Okay. And the CD label, we want this to be Nestor DC. Disk format, there's no audio. As in CD audio. MP3 audio is not applicable. This is only data. And we want to spit this out. Okay, we'll do a Nero disk it once. Okay, and then we hit the process button. Are you sure you want to create a data Nero disk it once image? Yes, I'm sure. Now, this is the only thing I don't like about this application. When your Dreamcast boots up, it's this big Sega logo comes up and says this product has been endorsed or sponsored by Sega. This will actually replace that with something else. Do a little bit of research and you can figure out how to create your own copyright logos, which is kind of cool because not everything really is endorsed or sponsored by Sega. But either way, I'll just use DC emulation. And here's the Nestor DC diskit1.nrg. We're going to save this, and it's done. Now, the reason this took so short of a time is because I had no ROMs inside of the inside of the games folder, and that is because default exclaimer about ROMs being illegal, copyright material, DMCA, blah 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 blah. I don't care. The more files you put on a disk, keeping in mind you have to have a 700 megabyte limit because you can only use 700 megabyte CDs. This is the gist of how to put everything together. Now, I've already put together some disk images. I'm going to go ahead and burn them, and we'll go to the Dreamcast side and check things out.
Alright, decided to take a couple of creative liberties with with my Nestor DC. I decided to use the skins from Nestor DC 6 on Nestor DC 7. Doesn't matter. Let's go to the computer side, do a couple of screen captures, and I'll show you the Dreamcast. There you go. Nestor DC. NES emulator. It'll go. The same goes for pretty much anything. The process is pretty simple. It's pretty easy, and hopefully this has sparked your interest in Dreamcast Homebrew. Well, what are you waiting for? Go do some homebrew. Put this thing to some use already.